Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nurmi,
I believe Ms. Harris needs to be sworn.
calling your client.
Yes, the defense calls Jodi Arias.
Ms. Arias, please stand to be sworn.
Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do.
Please be seated. You may proceed.
Thank you, Honor. Hi, Jodi.
Hi.
How are you feeling right now?
Nervous.
I want to ask you, well, let me ask you this. Is this a position you ever thought you would find yourself in, testifying here today?
The objection.
Relevance.
Approach, please.
Let me ask you a couple of important questions before we get back and start talking about who you are and why you're here, okay?
Okay.
Did you kill Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008?
Yes, I did.
Why?
The simple answer is that he attacked me, and I defended myself.
Okay. It was also brought up during these proceedings that you gave an interview with Inside Edition. Do you remember seeing that tape?
Yes, I do.
And in that tape you said that no jury would convict you, something to that effect. Do you remember seeing that? Remember saying that?
Yeah, I did say that.
Why?
I made that statement in September 2008, I believe it was. And at the time I had plans to commit suicide. So I was extremely confident that no jury would convict me because I didn't expect any of you to be here. I didn't expect to be here, so I could have easily said no jury would acquit me either. I couldn't say that though because there was an officer sitting 5 feet behind me, and had I told them the reason no jury would convict me at that time, I would have been thrown into a padded cell and stripped down, and that would have been my life for a while until I stabilized. So I was very confident that no jury would convict me because I planned to be dead. Probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said those are probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
Ms. Arias, I want to clarify another thing as well when we're talking here. Your name has been pronounced in most of this trial Arias. Is there another way of pronouncing it? Have you always pronounced it Arias?
I've heard it pronounced about 7 different ways. I say Arias, as does the rest of my family.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit and then talk about your family. Who's in your immediate family?
My immediate family consists of...
Relevance.
I'm the oldest of my parents. They also had another son about 2 years after I was born, my brother. And then I have another younger sister and another younger brother. I also have an older sister from a previous marriage of my father's.
Okay. So let me see if well, first of all, what are the names of your parents?
Bill and Sandy Arias.
Okay. And are they still married at this time?
Yes,
Okay.
about 33 years.
Okay. And you said you were the oldest child of Bill and Sandy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a half-sister that is older than you, is that right?
Yes, she's 5 years older than me.
Okay. And that is your father's daughter?
Yes, from a previous marriage.
Okay. And you have a brother that's 2 years younger than you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what is his name?
His name is Carl.
And you mentioned I believe the next youngest would have been another sister. What was her name?
Angela.
Okay. And your youngest brother, who is he?
Joseph.
Okay. And just so we get a bit of separation, how much younger than you is Angela?
Angela was born when I was 11, and Joseph was born when I was 13.
And what year were you born?
1980.
Do you remember where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in a few different cities. I was born in Salinas, California, and I lived there until I was almost 12.
And what was life like in Salinas?
For the first years of my life, it was really good.
When you say that, before you continue, let's clarify. What do you mean by first years?
I would say until about age 7, it was a fairly ideal childhood.
Okay, different people have different meanings when they say ideal, so why don't you describe for us what you mean by ideal childhood?
I have predominantly positive memories of my childhood at that time. My brother and I lived when I was about 4 years old, we moved to a house in a cul-de-sac. We had the center lot, so it was a huge backyard, and we had a lot of places to play there. There were trees to climb. There were other kids in the neighborhood and in the cul-de-sac that we played with. We were close in age, so my family traveled a lot. We went camping. We went to all the theme parks in California.
Did you go to school?
Of course, yes, I went to school.
And you went to grade school in Salinas then?
Yes, I went to a private school for about 3 years and then a public school.
Were you and Carl in school together, or did you go to different schools?
We were in school together. I was held back in kindergarten, so even though we're 2 years apart, he was only 1 grade behind me.
And tell us about your parents at that time, to your recollection. Were they both working? Was your mom at home? Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I was younger, I remember my mom used to work. I guess she was working as a server with my dad. He owned restaurants my whole life. And then when I was around 11 or 12, she became a dental assistant.
Okay. And you mentioned your life was, well, let me ask you a question. Do you remember what your interests were as a child?
Yes, I had pets, cats, dog, fish. I had a rat. I loved animals. We had a lot of pets. My brother had frogs, things like that. We played a lot of hopscotch and two-square when we were younger. We went roller skating. They didn't really have rollerblades yet, or at least that we used. We rode bikes a lot. We did a lot of camping. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the question.
Okay. All right. Well, you're speaking very quietly. Are you nervous today?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
What's that?
Yes.
Okay.
Very nervous.
Could you do me a favor and pull the mic a little closer to you? Jodi, one of the things that you said a couple questions ago when we were speaking is that your life was pretty ideal up until about age 7. Is something different after age 7, or?
It seemed like, my parents would just, spank us or hit us as discipline, so it seemed like at age 7, around then, it started getting a little bit more intense. That's something I remember.
Okay. You said they started spanking you.
Well, I was spanked before on occasion, just it seemed like the frequency and the intensity of it increased around that age.
What do you mean by that, frequency and intensity?
Well, just there were, I think that's the first year my dad started using a belt. My mom began to carry a wooden spoon in her purse.
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
May we approach?
You may. Objection overruled.
Jodi, if you could, first of all, do us all a favor again. I know it's difficult. I know you're nervous. You've told us before. But if you could just speak up a little louder, make sure everybody can hear you, okay?
Okay.
You were just now telling us that your mother carried a spoon with her. What did she do with that spoon?
It was a wooden kitchen spoon that she would keep in her purse, and if we were misbehaving, my brother and I, this was before Angela and Joseph were born, although it continued through that point. If we were misbehaving, she would use it on us. Sometimes she would pull the car over, and, if we were just being brats or something.
What do you mean by use it on you?
She would hit us with it.
She hit you hard?
It felt pretty hard, yes. It left welts.
It left welts on your body?
Yes.
When your dad hit you with the belt, did that leave welts on your body?
Objection, lack of foundation. Time, date.
Rephrase.
You told us that your dad hit you with the belt
Yes.
after age 7.
Yes.
Did he leave welts?
He didn't leave welts as often as my mom. She also used a belt. My dad was very intimidating, so I don't think he needed to hit us quite as hard to get the point across. My mom didn't carry that fear factor with her, so I think she used more force. So her blows felt a lot worse, actually.
Physically or emotionally?
Both.
You loved your mother?
Yes.
And
I
she
did.
hit you?
Yes.
You said that these were frequent, these incidents where your mother would hit you, they were frequent and intense. I think those are your words, right?
They were definitely intense, but they increased in frequency
Okay.
as I got a little older.
Can you discern for us how many times a week your mother would beat you with this spoon?
I don't recall how many times particularly, but it seemed like it could go anywhere from 4 times a week to once every 2 weeks. It just depended.
Okay. Now, how long did you live in Salinas? How old were you?
I was born there and I lived there until age 11.
Okay. So let me ask you this, that you talked about these beatings that began at age 7 when you lived in Salinas. Tell us about the next few years before you left Salinas. Did you continue going to school, that sort of thing? Tell us about that.
Yes, I went to a public school, had a lot of friends. My brother was at that school too, and he had his own circle of friends. And we would just do things together, school activities, after-school activities. And
Activities, what were your interests at this point in time in your life?
I began to get into art. Again, my pets were very central in my life at that time. I began to read a lot of books. I took piano lessons. My brother and I took karate lessons. He learned the clarinet. I learned the flute, things like that, just general.
Okay. Do me a favor, because when you say the word art, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people in terms of art. It's a pretty broad area. So were there certain areas of the art world that you were interested in, or can you describe that for us?
Yeah, when I was younger, I liked to color with Crayolas. And my older sister and I would color, and there were a lot of colors. She had the big box with all of the Crayolas, and so we would draw pictures and just watch cartoons and that kind of thing. So I would have coloring books, and I just began to take an interest in that because I wasn't able to draw what I saw, but I would see art, and it would fascinate me. So I slowly began to practice doing that.
Okay. Now, at this point in time, did the beatings from your mother and father, did they continue?
Yes.
Did they increase in nature?
They began to increase, I'd say, all the way through my teenage years.
Okay. Did they increase, you've talked about frequency and severity. Did the level of the brutality increase?
Yes, my brother and I we didn't like being hit. I know I didn't. So we would squirm around a little, and so the more we squirmed, the harder they would try to whack us. So just as that progressed, things would increase, At one point, I don't think she meant to, but my mom broke my brother's vein in his wrist because he was putting his hand behind his back to block one of her blows. And, as I became a teenager, my dad would get rougher and rougher.
Okay. Before we go on to rougher and rougher, let me ask you this, and I'm not simply talking physically. How did they feel? How did you feel when your own mother was beating you?
When I was younger, I remember feeling, I didn't have a word for it then, but I can describe it as betrayed and confused. And as I got a little bit older, it would just really make me mad because I didn't get why, I don't know, I understood that I was being punished, but I would just be mad at her a lot over that because it hurt.
Because you still loved her?
Yeah, I loved my mom.
Even though she was still beating you, you still loved her?
Yes, it put a strain on our relationship, but I still loved her, of course.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I still loved her.
Okay. Going back to what you said a few minutes ago about your dad and the beatings getting rougher and rougher, could you describe for us what you mean by that?
Yeah, he never beat me with his fists or anything, but he would just shove me into furniture, sometimes into the piano or things like that, into tables, chairs, desks, whatever was around. He would just push me really hard and I would go flying into that. One time I hit a doorpost. The side of my head hit the doorpost and it knocked me out momentarily. I just remember waking up on the ground with, my mom was there. We were all arguing. I was arguing with my mom and he got involved. And so I remember waking up and she was telling him to be careful.
And this incident you just described about you passing out or knocking into a door frame or doorpost as you described it, do you remember how old you were when this happened?
By then I was age 17, maybe 16, but I think I was 17.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit because you talked about instances of you being pushed into furniture and a piano, like it was just like nothing to it. Did this happen a lot?
Not as often with my dad as with my mom, but it just, I don't know, if I did something to upset them, it would happen.
Okay.
Sometimes I got grounded. That became more the norm in high school, so the physical punishment was a little bit more farther apart, but more intense than it was prior.
At this time that you were getting these beatings from your dad, did you love him as well?
Yes, of course.
In this time period now, you said you moved from Salinas about age 11?
Yes.
Okay. And where did you move to?
We moved to Santa Maria, California.
Okay. And I know we talked about this is where in Santa Maria your dad was pushing you into furniture, right? Is this where these things were taking place?
Yeah, these things really started in Santa Maria.
Okay. And was that where you went to, would that have been your junior high years, if I follow that correctly?
Yeah, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Okay. And did you go to school with Carl then?
I did.
Okay. And what were your interests at that point in time?
At that point, I was really focused on trying to make new friends. That was kind of difficult. In 6th grade, I went to an elementary school, and then in 7th grade, I went to another new school it was called it was junior high school, then it's now middle school, I guess. But, so it seemed like I was constantly going to new schools. There was this new school, then another new school, and then, then we moved again. And so it was just hard to make friendships. I did make a few close friends, though.
Okay. Well, you mentioned earlier that in your grade school years you had an interest in art.
Yes.
Okay. Did that continue through junior high?
Definitely. I don't remember so much in 6th grade focusing on my art, but in junior high, I took an art class, maybe 2 art classes, both years. And I had a really cool art teacher, and he mentored me.
Okay. Let me ask you, as it relates to your parents, how was your interest in art received? Did they encourage that? How was it received by your parents?
They didn't discourage me by any means, but they were lukewarm, I'd say. It was like, oh, that's nice. They weren't really moved by it, I don't think. I was getting a lot of praise from my classmates and my art teacher and other people, but I didn't really get that from them. They were just a little bit indifferent, but not disappointed.
Was that hard for you not to get encouragement from your parents?
It didn't really bother me at that time. I would think it was kind of the norm, so I was accustomed to it.
Okay. By that time in your life, you were used to them not fostering your interests, right?
Just me.
Let me ask you this. Did your parents ever show any interest as you were growing up in your artwork? Did they ever foster your interest in art?
They did, minimally. At one point, I think this was after I moved to Santa Maria, I was enrolled in one art class, which was after school, and it lasted a few weeks. I created a few pieces, a few projects, and I remember other family members being more encouraging. I have a cousin who's a very accomplished artist, and he complimented my work, and that was in the presence of my parents, so
Okay.
they never really went out of their way to, display it or anything like that, but I don't know.
All right. And where did you go to high school?
I went to high school, after 8th grade, we moved to Northern California, to Yreka, and I went to Yreka Union High School.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You said
It's
Yreka
called,
something.
at least when I was there, it's called Yreka Union High School.
Okay. And I'll ask just because it's different in different places. What grades were you in when you entered Yreka High School?
That school is grades 9 through 10. I'm sorry, 9 through 12.
Okay. So what years then did you enter? Did you enter in your freshman year or later?
Freshman year.
Okay. And so you were starting off at a new school again in high school, right?
Yes.
Okay. And just to give us a sense of things, how far was Yreka from Santa Maria where you moved from?
I don't know the mileage, but let's see, from Salinas to Santa Maria, it's 8 hours, and then, Salinas to Yreka is 8 hours, and then Santa Maria is another 3 hours south, so.
So you were several hours.
Over 10
away from
hours,
your
yeah,
friends,
over 10, yeah.
Did you know anybody at Yreka High School when you were going?
I didn't know anybody when I moved there, but my mother went to, I don't know if she went to school with or knew another woman about her age who had a daughter my age that was going into high school as well. So we hung out a little bit during the summer, so I knew her and her sister, but that was it.
So just a couple people.
Yes.
Now you mentioned when you moved to, based on what you told us before, we corrected an understanding that the beatings, the pushing of the furniture, that sort of thing with your dad continued throughout your high school years.
Yes.
Were those the incidents you were talking about before, about being pushed into the post and the furniture, or were there other incidents?
That happened when I was in high school. There were a few things that happened right before we moved. A bunch of friends and I one night decided, like the last night I was there, we decided to sneak out of the house and hang out. And my parents woke up and found out. So when I came back, my dad asked where I had been, and I had fallen asleep. He woke me up around 6, and so when I sat up and I was disoriented because I had been sleeping, so I didn't give him a satisfactory answer. So he hit me across the face, and I fell back down, and then he sat me back up and asked me again, and I didn't give him a satisfactory answer, so he hit me across the face again, and I fell down again.
When you say he hit you across the face, did he punch you?
No, it was an open-handed, hard slap.
Do you recall, did you bleed?
No, I didn't. Not that I recall.
Did you bruise?
Not that I recall.
Did it hurt?
Yes.
Just so we can clarify as well, your dad's a pretty big guy, right?
He was very big at that time. His health he's frail now, but he was very big at the time.
Can you give us an idea about tall and how much he weighed at that time?
I don't know his weight, but he's about 5'11". He used to bench press 520 pounds. He was a really big guy for a while.
You said he used to bench press 500-something pounds.
520, yes.
Was that a hobby of his, weightlifting, or can you describe that for us?
Yes, he was very much into weightlifting. He had, I guess it was like a Bowflex machine at home. I think it was called Soloflex. It was one from like the 80s. But he would use that a lot to work out. He was into martial arts. We watched a lot of movies like that. Things like that. He went to the gym frequently.
To your knowledge, was your mom aware, I know you mentioned the one incident where your mom was present, was your mom aware of your dad beating you?
Well, when she was present, yes, of course. Sometimes we were on road trips together, and they would take turns if they, had to pull the car over or something. Not that it happened several times in one trip, but I remember it being both my mom and my dad punishing me in the presence of each other. And I don't know, when she was gone, I assumed they would talk about it.
Okay. We talked a little bit about your dad during high school and your mom with the wooden spoon. In your younger years, did your mom's beatings with the wooden spoon, did they continue in high school as well?
They continued for a short time, but I think as I turned 16, 17, I don't recall her carrying the wooden spoon around. She would just start grabbing whatever was available, like a hairbrush, or she had acrylic nails, so sometimes she would grab me and dig her nails into my skin, things like that.
Okay. In high school, what were some of your interests?
In high school, I was very interested in learning Spanish, so I took that all throughout high school and middle school. I was getting into art. I was excited to get my driver's license. I traveled abroad to Costa Rica to learn Spanish better. I had a few friends. I didn't really make a lot of close friends like I had before. It just seemed like I was constantly making friends and then we were moving away. So,
Just any other scope, she was asking what her interests were.
Sustained.
Did you have a lot of friends in high school?
I had a large circle of friends, but nobody I was very close with.
Would I be correct in assuming that your interest in art by the time you're in high school moved beyond the Crayola crayon phase?
Yeah, very much so.
Tell us about that.
I was at my grandmother's house one day and she had an old set of oil paint, and I knew what oil paint was. I'd never worked in that medium before, so I didn't know what I was doing. I just took a piece of printer paper and started painting oil paint on this paper, and oil began to spread around the paint. So I figured, okay, that's not going to work. So I went to Michael's, the arts and crafts store, and bought some supplies and began to experiment with that and started painting.
And did you work during high school?
I did. My dad owned a restaurant at the north end of town. It's now a Mexican restaurant, but he owned it then, and I would work as a server there from the time I was a freshman on through, I think, 96 or 7 when he closed it.
So you started working in 9th grade. How old were you in 9th grade?
In 9th grade, I was 15.
And was there a certain amount of days you worked while you were in high school?
He put me on a few afternoons and the weekends.
Okay. Did you graduate high school?
No, I didn't.
Why didn't you graduate high school?
At the time, about 3 months, well, it's kind of complicated.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it. Did you drop out of high school?
Yes, I did.
Where were you living at the time you dropped out of high school?
I was living with my boyfriend at the time, about a little town 6 miles outside of Wairika.
Let's break that. Why did you leave? Prior to that, were you living with your parents?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you leave your parents' home to go live with your boyfriend?
I was kind of becoming tired of the discipline, and I was 3 months until I was 18, and one day they decided to ground me until I was 18 because I skipped one period in high school because there was a final for my, I was taking a college history class, U.S. history, and I didn't feel like I had adequately studied for the exam, so I skipped that period to study for the exam, and decided I would make it up the next day. So I parked my car in the parking lot of Rite Aid and just cracked open the book, and I was studying it for that hour. And my dad, somehow he found me. It's a small town, so I guess the school notified him that I wasn't present for that class, so he found me, and at that point they didn't use physical discipline that day, but I was grounded till I was 18, so I couldn't fathom being grounded for 3 months. When you were grounded in my house, it meant no phone, no TV, no friends, no social functions of any kind. You're in your room, period. So
let me ask you this. This would have been towards the end of your senior year in high school, or was this at the end of your
yeah, it was in May, I think.
Okay, so of your senior year or of your junior
Maybe
year?
April. My junior year.
Okay.
Yes.
So you dropped out of high school before you finished your junior year? Is that right?
No, I did finish the junior year, mostly with D's and F's, because toward the end of the year, I just let it all fall apart.
You mentioned discipline, you talked about grounding. Was there any particular physical incident or an incident of abuse that motivated you to leave your parents' home?
One of the incident I described where I was knocked against, I called it a doorpost, I guess it's a door frame. Then at that point the guy I was dating, we started talking about me possibly moving in with him. So after that incident, I began to surreptitiously pack boxes of my things and start moving them out to his house. And then when they grounded me until I was 18, all of my stuff mostly was there. And I thought, I was going to wait until I was 18 to move in with him, but it was 3 months away, and it just made sense to me at the time as a 17-year-old. So I just moved out.
Okay. After your junior year then, did you just not go back to school? Is that?
Yeah, I turned 18 that summer. I got a job at another restaurant and began working there full time. I had bills to pay now, car insurance and credit cards and that kind of thing. So it just, to me, it made more sense to work so I could support myself and my boyfriend. He didn't have a job.
Okay. And what was your boyfriend's name?
His name was Bobby
And what was his last name?
Juarez.
And Mr. Juarez, how old was he in relation to you?
He was 3 years older than me.
So he would have been out of school, I would assume?
Yes, he was out of high school.
And what did he do for a living?
He had never been employed at that point, so, it was an isolated town we lived in, and it was difficult to obtain employment.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, as it relates to Mr. Juarez, when did you meet him?
I first met him the first summer that I moved to Wairika when I was 15. The carnival comes to town, and so I was there with the girl I'd mentioned that my mom introduced me to. Her and her sister, we were there. And I saw him walking in a crowd with a few other friends, and he caught my eye. It was very intriguing looking. He was kind of dressed like 18th century goth, kind of. He was...
Well, can you describe for some of us who may not follow that reference, just kind of describe what he was wearing maybe?
Yeah, it was like July or August when I met him, and it's in the maybe triple digits in the temperature. It's very hot. Wairika gets really hot, not quite like the desert, but in the triple digits in the summer. But this guy was dressed in a black suit and a high collar white shirt, and he was on crutches. He had long, dark, curly hair, and he just seemed intriguing to me, so I remember seeing him walk by, and I didn't approach him or anything, but I noticed him. So we spent the day there, my friends and I, walking around, and at one point they were getting in line for the zipper. I didn't want to get on the zipper. There was only 2 per cage anyway, so I was kind of the third odd one out. So I just stood next to the line waiting for them to go on the zipper and come back. But I was just looking around, and I caught his eye again, and he was looking right at me. And he motioned for me to come over. He went like that. And I didn't know if he was talking to me, so I kind of looked around and looked at him again, and he did it again. So I walked up to him, and he said, in a very kind way, he said, "Do you want to go?"
Hearsay.
Oh, sorry.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this without telling you what he said, and just to clarify a bit based on what you told us, he would have been around the age of 18 at this time, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were 15. You meet him at a state fair.
Yes.
Thing. Okay. Tell us then, do you begin a relationship at that point in time, or just kind of describe for us how that relationship was at that time?
No, he invited me to go on the zipper with him, so we went on one ride with that and talked a little bit as we were flipping around, and after that we parted, and I didn't see him again for a while.
Okay. When did you see him again?
I think it was October, maybe November of that same year. I was at a homecoming football game for my high school, and I saw him again, and he was with some friends. And I was really shy, but I wanted to say hi to him, so I walked up to him and said, "Do you remember me?" And he said he remembered me, but he couldn't remember my name, so I told him I didn't remember his name either. So we kind of reintroduced ourselves, and he said, "Tell me your phone number, and I promise I'll remember it." So I gave him the house phone, which was my parents' phone. We didn't have cell phones. And he remembered it and called me.
Did you begin dating at that time?
No, we were just friends. We talked for a while. We weren't dating.
Okay.
He was actually seeing a girl, I think. I don't remember.
Okay. So you were just friends for a period of time?
Yeah, several months. We were just friends.
But you were telling us he became your boyfriend at that point, so I'm assuming there's some point in time that you two began dating.
Yeah, the girl broke up with him, and there was a period of time where he was single and I was single, and we started just talking more and more. And then I think it was on New Year's that year when I was a freshman, we decided to become boyfriend-girlfriend.
Okay. And then you said that was your sophomore, the beginning of your sophomore year? Or?
I would have still been a freshman then.
Okay. And you said you were going to become boyfriend and girlfriend with
Yes.
him. Okay, you guys decided that. Was he still in high school at that point in time?
No, he was out of high school.
And to your recollection, was he working at that point in time?
No, he wasn't working.
Okay. Describe for us then what being boyfriend and girlfriend at that stage in your life meant for you and Mr. Arias.
For us, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license yet. I think I was getting my permit that year. So he would come to town, and so during lunch, a lot of kids would leave campus, and there's a small gas station, USA gas station near the high school. So I would walk down there and he would be there. There was an arcade there, and he really liked video games, so we would meet there and just hang out, hold hands, that kind of thing.
Okay. How long at this point in time, how long did you date Bobby continuously from the time that you were 15 till you moved out of the home?
No, we stayed together for a while, and I think at age 15 I felt like the relationship was getting very intense. He was talking about being together forever, and you know, I loved him, but I didn't feel like I was in love with him, and I knew at age 15 there's no way I could decide who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with at that point. So he wanted to move to San Francisco, and he had all kinds of wild ideas, they seemed fun, but they were just not where I was. So at that point, I broke up with him.
What do you mean wild ideas?
Well, he entertained the belief in vampires, and he thought, well, let's go to San Francisco and see if we can find some real vampires. And, you know, I used to read Anne Rice novels at the time. It didn't seem realistic to me, but it seemed like it was just an idea that I would go along with, you know, with him.
And this was at a time when you were about 15 years of age. He wanted to move to San Francisco and hunt vampires,
Yeah.
right?
So we could live together forever and be together forever.
Was there a certain point in time then when this was going on and you said it was getting too intense for you? Did you and Mr. Arias break up?
Yes. It was one afternoon. I broke up with him on the phone. I don't know where my parents were, but my Aunt Lisa was at the house. She was picking my brother and I up. I was having this conversation with him. He was very upset. And Lisa wanted us to leave. She wanted to take us. We had to go somewhere with her. So I didn't have time to stay on the phone with him for a long time and talk through it with him. So I had to sort of abruptly end the phone call shortly thereafter, and it was, I don't know, I guess he didn't take that well.
Okay. What do you mean by you guess he didn't take it that well?
I found out a few years later that he...
Objection, Pearson.
Approach. Overruled, you may continue.
Sorry, Ms. Arias. We were asking, you said you understood that Mr. Arias didn't take the breakup you had when you were about 15 so well. Describe for us what you mean by that.
I learned a few years later that he slit both of his wrists and tried to kill himself, and he was committed to some kind of psychiatric ward in Citrus Heights, just north of Sacramento.
Okay. Did you have, after this phone call where you broke up and you left the home, did you have any sort of relationship with him in between that and the well, let me ask you this way. It sounds like he was your boyfriend again about the time when you turned 18, right? A few months
Yes.
beforehand? Okay. How did that come about?
We didn't talk at that point for a few years. It's kind of silly. There was this older man that used to come into my parents' restaurant. I'd say he was in his 60s, maybe 70s, and he always had his Bible. And it was a small pocket version of the New Testament, and he had it all marked up, and he was always, quoting Bible scripture and things. And he had done the math in the Bible and determined that he knew when the second coming was going to occur. And he said it was going to occur September 23rd, 1997. So I was really naive, and I kind of believed him. So he would come in weekly or several times a week on my shift and continue to reiterate that. So, at the time I was non-denominational Christian, and this seemed important. So I thought that Bobby should know about it, because at the time he wasn't religious, and he was uncertain about his spirituality, at least when I last had known him. So to me it was important that he at least hear that information, so he could make a decision for himself. So I made contact with him again and called him in, I think, mid-September 2007.
Okay,
I'm sorry, 1997.
just so we're clear, in terms of your high school years, how long of a break, I guess, was there between this phone call that you made to break up with Mr. Arias and the phone call you made to recontact him? How long of a break was there in between those two?
I'd say, let's see, maybe 19 months.
So you make this phone call to Mr. Juarez, and you said this was in 1997?
Yes.
Okay. And where would you have been in school then? Would you be in junior year? Or?
I was just starting my junior year.
Okay. And subsequent to this phone call, did you begin to remain in friendship with Mr. Juarez? Tell us about how that evolved.
Well, when I first called, he answered the phone. I could recognize his voice. And I said, "Is Bobby there?" And he said, "Yeah, who's this?" And I said, "Jodi." And I immediately heard a click. So I left it alone, and I thought, okay, because our last phone call some years back didn't end well. And so the next night I tried one more time, and the same thing happened. So I left it alone. And about...
Well, let me ask you this before we continue. You mentioned that Wairika was a pretty small town, right?
Yes.
Okay. You never ran into Mr. Juarez in between these two phone calls?
No, he didn't live in Wairika. He lived in Montague, which is 6 miles from Wairika. It's even smaller. I think there's about 1,000 people in that town.
Okay. But never during this time did you run into him at all?
No.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you had talked about, you had called him a couple times, you hear the click on the other end of the phone. How does the relationship progress from that point?
I don't know how many days later. It was under a week, maybe 4 days, maybe 5 days. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and we were talking, and I heard the call waiting beep, so I clicked over, and I heard someone say, "Is Jodi there?" And I recognized his voice, so I clicked back over and said, "I have to call you back." So I clicked back over, and we started talking again.
Okay. Did you, after that conversation, did you become friends again? Did you start dating again? Just describe that for us.
Yeah, I felt kind of silly explaining to him why I was calling him, especially knowing that his religious beliefs at that time were not really defined. And I kind of expected him to laugh at me, but it was important to me. So I told him the reason I was calling, and
Overruled, you may continue.
he expressed appreciation for that, which surprised me. We just sort of picked up from there and began talking again.
Does talking mean dating?
No, not yet.
Okay. Tell us how the relationship progressed from him making telephone contact with you.
Well, at the time I had a boyfriend. He lived in another country. So we corresponded So it wasn't a romantic reason. Like I had said, I reached out to him for a spiritual reason. I don't know if he was seeing anybody at that time. I don't think he was. He used to call a party line a lot and meet people on that. I guess this was before the internet was really, in every single home.
Let me interrupt you a little bit there on a couple of different things. You said he made contact on a party line. What is that? Can you describe that for us?
From my understanding, I didn't talk on it, but from my understanding, it was a 900 number that you could call, and it's like a chat room, but it's on the telephone instead of on the computer.
And you chatted to Bobby that way, or he?
I didn't. He chatted with other people that way.
Okay. And you also mentioned, I don't want to be too far from it, you mentioned that when he made this contact with you, after the contact he made for what you described as spiritual reasons, you said that you had a boyfriend in another country, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that boyfriend's name?
Victor.
Did Victor have a last name?
Arias, ironically.
I'm sorry, what?
His last name was also Arias.
Okay. And where did you meet Victor Arias?
The summer that I turned 17, right before I turned 17 in July, I flew to Costa Rica on an exchange program, and I spent 3 weeks there with a family. Their name was also Arias, and they had 2 sons and 2 daughters in that family, and the oldest son was just a little older than me, and so we kind of clicked and got to know each other and sort of had a little romance kind of blossom thing. I don't know, it was like my first experience of like the warm fuzzies, somebody that I really felt that I cared for.
Okay, and that relationship lasted a few weeks, or tell me how it lasted beyond your being there.
It sort of began to develop while I was in Costa Rica, and I flew back toward the end of, I had my 17th birthday there in that country, and then I flew back at near the end of July, and we corresponded and talked occasionally on the phone through August, and then he flew to the United States that September and stayed in Redding, which is a city about 100 miles south of Wairika. He had some people that he knew there. He stayed there about a week, I think, and then stayed at my house for 2 weeks before flying back.
And when did he come stay for you for 2 weeks? When was that?
That was early September 1997.
Okay. So this is about the time then that you were close to the time that you were in contact with Mr. Juarez as well, right?
Yes, it was just right before that.
Okay. And you considered Mr. Arias to be a boyfriend?
Yeah, actually he had given me a ring, and it was kind of a promise ring, like we were going to get married, but we weren't officially engaged. So we would talk about children and marriage, and he wanted me to come live down there and start a family.
Okay. You said it was your first experience of, I guess, what we'd call young love, right?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I wouldn't say totally in love, but it was my first taste of being like, just feeling like warm about somebody, if that makes sense.
As it relates to your situation then, Mr. Arias, Victor, he goes back to Costa Rica, I assume, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the relationship becomes one probably, is it primarily of letters, phone calls? Describe that for us.
Yeah, we wrote a lot. The postman actually got to know my name and face, and he would tease me every time I went to the post office to get it stamped to send to Costa Rica, and I would receive letters from him that were really romantic, and the Spanish language is very romantic, so he would write things like that, very romantic.
Okay, and relative to your age, how old was Victor?
I don't remember his exact age. I want to say he was about a year older than me. I think we were just, we were very close in age, but he was older than me.
Okay. Now, when you started interacting with Mr. Juarez again, we've heard from your earlier testimony that he became your boyfriend at a certain point in time when you were around 17 years old, right?
Yes.
Okay. Could you just kind of describe for us what happened in that time period when Victor was your boyfriend and then Bobby became your boyfriend?
Yes. Bobby and I would talk a few times a week, and then it became a little more frequent. Victor and I would, I couldn't see myself like moving to Costa Rica and having that kind of life and having children with him. We argued like over little silly things. Victor was very jealous, and so we would I couldn't talk to any of my high school friends that were guys. I went through the drive-through, and there was a classmate that I had gone to school with 2 years, over the years, and he had a job there, and I was driving, of course, because Victor was from out of the country, and we just were there to get ice cream. It was hot, and he gave us the ice cream, and we hadn't seen each other all summer, this person that served us, and the interaction I had with him, Victor didn't like it, so we argued over things like that. When we were in Costa Rica, he wanted me always to walk on the inside of on the sidewalk away from the street, and we were at a huge soccer game there. It's a very big deal there. They call it football, but it's soccer. And there was actually someone that walked by that looked a lot like Bobby, and it kind of reminded me of him at the time. He had long, dark, curly hair, and I glanced at him, and Victor got upset. So things like that, I just didn't see myself being in a marriage with him, so I broke up with him around October, maybe November, 1997, on the phone.
On the phone?
Yes.
Okay. After you broke up with Victor, did you continue seeing Mr. Juarez?
We weren't really seeing each other. We were just friends at that time, but we continued to talk.
Okay. When did the friendship move into something more, to be your boyfriend?
It was again around New Year's. I think we spent New Year's Eve. I had a car then, so we drove out to this little white chapel it's called Little Shasta. It's even smaller town. I don't even know if it's considered a town. And it's this small white chapel with a tall steeple, and there was snow everywhere. And we just kind of hung out there and rung in the New Year. Didn't really do it. I had began to develop feelings for him right before Christmas, and so I expressed that, and he said he had feelings for me too, and so we decided to give things another try at that point.
Okay. And this would have been a few months prior to you moving in with him. Is that right?
I believe I moved in with him in late April, and so we're around the New Year. So 4 months, 4.5, maybe 5.
Did your parents, were they aware of your relationship with, and I'm speaking as it relates to the occasion we're talking about now, when you're 17 or 17, excuse me. Did they know about your relationship with Mr. Juarez?
They knew about it. I don't know how they knew. I wasn't very open with them about my relationships because of prior negative experiences with regard to that. So somehow, it's a small town. I'm sure people told them they saw us running around or hanging out in the park or just walking around, and we hung out. So people would tell my mom and things like that.
Did you ever get any indication that your parents approved or disapproved of this relationship?
I didn't talk extensively with my dad about it, but my mom didn't like the fact that I was with him because she was basing her opinion on him off of rumors she had heard about him.
Okay. When you described it in high school how you were working for your father at your father's restaurant, right?
Yes.
And you were in high school your junior year. All this was going on at the point in time when you began dating Mr. Juarez, right?
I think my dad's restaurant closed the year prior when I was still a sophomore. I can't quite remember. No, I think he closed that spring. I think he closed that spring in 90, that would have been 98.
Okay.
I can't remember. It was sometime in high school he closed his restaurant.
Okay. Did you work elsewhere after that?
Yes.
Before you moved out?
Did I? Yes. I worked briefly as a hostess at a little restaurant called Grandma's House.
And during this point in time, when you're a 17-year-old high school student, Mr. Juarez is out of school, are you supplying him with money at this point in time before you've left school?
Yes. Well, he lived with two people he called mom and dad. I think they were his grandparents. Bobby said he was adopted, so his real parents, it was kind of, I never really met them. But he lived with them. They would be his mom and dad, by definition. So I think they were just supplying, clothing and shelter and food and that kind of thing at that point.
Okay. So going back to my question, were you supplying Mr. Juarez with money at this point in time?
At this point, no.
Okay. Then you leave high school and you move in with Mr. Juarez, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. In the spring.
And you mentioned that he was living with persons you believe to be his grandparents, his adopted grandparents.
I don't know if they were really related or if he just called them his parents. But if anything, they were more like his grandparents, but he called them mom and dad.
You say that because of their age as opposed
Yeah, they were
to...
very much older. I actually saw who everyone around town kind of knew was his mother, but he didn't want anything to do with her, and she was more appropriate age to be his mother. And these people were more like in their 70s, late 70s maybe.
Okay. When you spoke about your first relationship with Mr. Juarez, you spoke about his desire to move to San Francisco and chase vampires and be with you forever, and how he dressed in a goth style. Was that 15-year-old Bobby the same way he was when you got back together with him?
No, he was 20 now. He was a little more mature, but he still had that eccentricity about him. He had a flair. For Halloween, he would dress up as the character played by Brandon Lee from The Crow, with the white face and all black leather and all that. So it was a Halloween thing, but he really got into that, and he did it pretty well, actually. So he was still drawn to that, and part of that was fascinating to me. I thought he was beautiful on the inside and out, and I was attracted to him in that regard. But he was a little more down to earth at this point.
Earlier you were describing for us a situation where you were taking some of your possessions and moving it into Mr. Juarez's home, and now eventually you moved out.
Yes.
Okay. What was the last straw for you to move out of your house?
I think the last straw was actually when they said you're grounded until you're 18. And a lot of my things were already at Bobby's house or his parents' house. They were putting it in a storage shed right behind the house. Just boxes of things that I had been saving because I knew I was going to be on my own soon. My dad had recently closed his restaurant. He let me have a lot of the plates, the dishes, the silverware. So that would just get me started. So things like that. Old books I'd already read but didn't want to part with. Things like that went to the storage shed. And then when I was grounded, I thought, I only have a few more things to throw in the car plus my cat. So I stayed up all night packing while my parents slept. And my dad, when he would ground me, he used to unhook my car. I don't know what that means, but I would go out and try to turn the engine and it wouldn't turn. He unhooked something under the hood. And I think I figured out how to rehook it. So then he started taking the entire piece so that I couldn't rehook it. So the first thing I did was I went out after they went to sleep to check if my car would start, and it did. So I was relieved. So I began to load up the car. I was almost completely packed, and then I think around 4:30 or 5, I heard one of my parents awake. So I was in the living room, still packing up a few things, and I jumped on the couch real quick to pretend like I was sleeping so they wouldn't wonder why I was awake. And I was very tired, so I ended up falling asleep. And the next thing I knew, it was 7:30 or 7 o'clock, and my mom was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. And I thought, oh shoot, I missed my opportunity. But I just went into my bedroom, found my cat, picked her up, and I just started walking out the door. My mom said, what are you doing? And I said, nothing, and I just shut the door and put my cat in my car and drove out to Bobby's house, unloaded it, and then went to school that day.
And you say Bobby's house. These people you described as his grandparents, do they live in this home as well?
Yes.
Okay. And was there anyone else besides them and Bobby in this home?
No.
Okay. Describe for us the environment you were leaving your home with your parents in order to live with Bobby. What were you moving to?
It was, structurally the house was very good, but it was in very bad shape. His parents were very heavy smokers, so there was always a haze hanging out in the living room, and there was a lot of, I don't know what it's called, I guess tar or something running down the walls, kind of in a deep brown. The living room was almost not quite to the ceiling, but it was packed with a bunch of things. I don't know what it was, just various odds and ends. I guess they were hoarders. Bobby did the best to make his bedroom his own little space, but he wasn't allowed to touch any of those things while they were there. And so, I mean, the kitchen was very, very dirty. The bathroom was very dirty. The linoleum was coming off the floor, and the shower was kind of falling apart, and it was just a mess. All of the yard all around the house was overgrown. I went back to my parents' house a few days later to borrow their cleaning supplies for it.
Doesn't sound like Bobby's house was a great place to live.
No, he hated it. Like I said, his own room, he did his best to make that his space and make it habitable. And then his parents would kind of sit in the living room all day and watch TV and smoke till they went to bed.
You mentioned he kept his room in a different way. Was that a room you shared with him?
Yes.
Were you having a sexual relationship with him at that point in time?
I'm trying to remember if we were at that point. We did eventually. I don't remember if it was right before I moved in with him. I think it was right after I moved in with him. I can't remember. We waited several months.
Okay. So from what you're telling us then is that you moved into this home, this filthy home with one clean room in it. You dropped out of high school and you were working, right?
Sorry, will you repeat that?
At this point in time when you moved in with Bobby, you were at the end of your junior year and that was your last school,
Yes, I was
right?
coming up on the end of my junior year.
And you were working as well, I believe you said, at Grandma's? if I heard you
Yes, my
correctly.
dad had recently closed his restaurant, and I think I got a part-time position there at Grandma's house.
Okay. And was this how you were supporting yourself?
Yes, it was.
And were you supporting Mr. Juarez as well?
Not quite yet. Occasionally we'd go on a date, and I, of course, would pay for it, which wasn't a big deal to me at the time. He had a problem getting identification to prove that he was legally able to work in the United States. So he didn't have a photo ID. He couldn't find a copy of his birth certificate. He didn't have a social security card, but he did have a social security number. But every time we went to the DMV or the social security office or the courthouse, they wanted one form of identification that we were trying to get. So of those three, it was hard to get all of them. So he couldn't, that was the reason he couldn't work, or so. That was what I understood.
Okay. So, based on what you told us earlier then, at the end of your junior year, you drop out of high school and you begin working full-time to support yourself, right?
Yes, Bobby and I went to Chico, California briefly, which is near Sacramento. It's a little bit south, I think. I was going to work there. I was going to live there. It didn't work out. We were there for about a week. And we went back. And so then I applied at a restaurant where, I applied at Denny's actually. And the woman there that gave me a good reference had worked for my dad the previous year, her and her husband. So I was hired there around, I think, August 2000. Wait, I'm sorry, that would be 1998.
And are you working full-time?
Yes, I am. Was.
Okay. And is that the only job you had, or did you have another?
I didn't, I'm sorry, I forgot, because in between that, I did have a brief job at this restaurant called the Purple Plum. I was a busser. I worked there briefly before thinking I was going to move to Chico, and then I came back and began to work at Denny's.
So working in Denny's, was this how you were supporting yourself and Mr. Juarez?
Yes, that became our income.
Were you making a lot of money?
Well, the cost of living wasn't very high. I would say no, but we were making ends meet because I didn't have rent or mortgage. At that point, his parents had moved out and into a rest home. So we had the kind of run of the house and cleaned it up a little and, discovered just things about the house that we didn't know about before because it was so cluttered.
Well, who was paying for the phone? Who was paying for the power?
Not me. I don't know. I guess I really don't know. The phone was there, the power was there. I think his parents were still paying for it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Were you giving Bobby money to buy food, or how was that?
Yes, I went grocery shopping. I started buying him a few clothes. At one point, the power did shut off in the winter.
The power was shut off.
Yeah, it was shut off briefly.
So how did you get by? Were you able to get it turned back on? How did that?
We had a furnace and we used candles for a while. It was very cold. I don't remember how they got the power on, but Bobby had a friend or knew somebody that he had come over to the house and he tinkered with a meter on the side of the house and then we had power again. So.
At this point in time, life doesn't seem like it was very ideal.
No, but it was, I enjoyed the freedom. We just played it by ear. I got moved to the graveyard shift at Denny's after some months there. And so we all became night owls, me and Bobby and all of our circle of friends that we socialized with.
At this point in time, how did Bobby treat you?
I thought he treated me well until I discovered that he wasn't being faithful.
And when in your relationship did you discover that?
We had gone, he was on the party line a lot and he talked to this woman frequently. He said they were just friends. They had been interested in each other in the past, but they decided they were just friends. It made me a little uncomfortable. He would talk to her a lot, actually, in my presence, so I figured he's doing it right in front of me. There's nothing going on there. So then one day we went to the library. That's where we went for our internet access, and he would email her a lot. And I had to go to work at the Purple Plum, and I dropped him off at his friend's house, and I went to go to the Purple Plum. And before going to the Purple Plum, I went back to the library, and I clicked. He had a Hotmail account. This is in 1998. So I clicked I don't know if they had different security things for Hotmail at that point, but I clicked the back button to see what was really going on with her because I had suspicions, and I found a whole bunch of love letters that he was writing her that were all contemporaneous with the time that we were together. So I printed them out, and I called in sick for work because I was not well emotionally, and I drove back out to his friend's house, and I didn't want to create a scene of drama, so I just said, "Can I talk to you?" And so we went into the bathroom, and I pulled them out of my pocket and handed them to him, and he opened them up and read them, and he kind of felt like shocked.
Kind of glossed over it a little bit. When you saw these letters, how did it make you feel?
It didn't make me feel good. He was very loving and poetic with this person, and I could tell he had real feelings for her, and I don't know, I guess I felt jealous a little bit, but my heart was pounding. I just felt very deceived. I forgot to mention one of the things I did before I went to the house is I drove back out to Montague, and I took all of my belongings out of his room and put them in my car, and decided I was going to move out and in with my grandmother. So that's when I went back to his house and confronted him with those.
Okay.
Or I mean, back to the friend's house, sorry.
You mentioned that he was, this woman, whoever it was that he was corresponding with, that he was treating her in a very loving, poetic way.
Yes.
It leads to the implication, anyway, that he wasn't that way to you.
He was initially, but I don't know, I guess we had just sort of gotten comfortable around each other, and we weren't fighting or anything. We were just kind of, I don't know, I don't really know how to explain it. He was still loving toward me, but it seemed like he was going out of his way to really court her, whereas I was already, in the bag, so to speak.
You were already, what was that?
Just like he didn't have to court me, I was already with him. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. Was Bobby ever physically abusive towards you?
There was one time where we had a fight. Trying to think, I think this was in '99. We had broken up and got back together a few times. I broke up with him, obviously, after that incident, and then he somehow, it's a long story, but he convinced me to stay, so I stayed and put all my things back, and he promised he wouldn't have contact with her anymore. But we broke up a few more times and then got back together, and at one point, I had moved out of his house and I was living with another woman, and it wasn't far from his house. It was like 2 blocks. And in Montague, there's a lot of fields. We could see each other's houses from there, sort of. And so I was advised over and over to get away from him because he's not healthy, but my heart was, I still cared about him. So one day he came over to the house, like he always did, and we were hanging out. And I don't remember how, but an argument started, and
Objection, foundation is the incident occurred.
Sustained.
When was this?
this was sometime in 1999. I think it was in the fall, early fall, like September, maybe even August, but I think it was around sometime in the early fall.
Okay. And he was at the home. Was he physical with you at this acquaintance's home?
Yes, our argument escalated, and he approached me and spun me around, and he was very much into martial arts, so he had some kind of hold. I guess it was called a stranglehold. So he started strangling me, and just for a few seconds, and then he let go. I almost passed out. I fell on my knees, and it kind of made me upset because he'd never done that before. So I got up. He started walking away. I got up, and I said something to him like, what did I say? Something to the effect of, my family would be very upset if they found out what you just did. And then he began to describe in detail how he would kill each member of my family. He knew a lot about my family, so these were all very personalized details about how they would die. And at that point, the argument escalated again, and he attacked me again. I don't know how, he jumped on me, and at that point I was trying to get to the phone to call 911, and he got my arm in some kind of lock and was putting pressure on my forearm, and I thought he might break it, because that seemed to be what the goal was. So I managed to grab the phone and I called 911, and he grabbed it out of my hand and hung up, and I was crying, and he kept telling me to shut up because they were going to call back. So he was right. The phone rang and he answered, and he gave the operator an excuse, like said my girlfriend was trying to program 911 into the speed dial and accidentally called it.
This happened, and then you got back together with him, right? Or you didn't really break up? This happened in
This was really, this was really toward the end of our relationship. This was really toward the end. It didn't happen. We didn't stay together much longer after that.
But you did stay together after that, right?
We continued to hang out. He met a friend that he had known prior to. His name was Matt, and he moved in with Matt. And this was in,
Let me ask you this. Why did you stay together with him after this incident?
well, I don't know that we were still together, but he would still come over to the house where I lived. And it was just a nicer place to hang out than his. And I just continued to hang out with him in that regard.
Why would you hang out with him in that regard?
Well, the physical incident that occurred that day, those two things were isolated, and during all the years that I've known him, that had never happened before, so I just didn't think that it was something that was a pattern of his or that would continue.
Did you ever engage in sexual behavior with him after this incident?
I don't remember, maybe, not very, maybe once or twice. I don't remember, honestly.
And why was that okay with you after this incident?
I still loved him.
You mentioned a point in time when Bobby moved in with an individual named Matt.
Yes.
Okay. And I believe you were talking about how at the end of your relationship with Bobby, you moved into your grandparents' home, correct?
Yes. I moved out of that woman's house and into my grandmother's house.
And what city is your grandmother's house located in?
Wairika.
And did you live there just with your grandmother, or was anyone else living there with you?
My grandfather also lived there, and their dog, Ringo.
Were you close to your grandparents? How was your relationship with them?
I felt close to my grandparents, not like lovey-dovey close, but they're very down-to-earth people. Well, my grandmother is very down-to-earth, and I can just tell her anything, and it doesn't really faze her.
Why didn't you move back in with your parents?
Well, I didn't want to go back to that environment. We got along very well after I moved out, and I wanted to keep it that way.
Okay. Tell us about your life after you moved back to your grandparents' home. Are you still working at Denny's? Do you go back to school? Just kind of describe your life for us.
Yes. After that incident occurred with Bobby, I had worked at Denny's for about a year at that point, and if you're a full-time employee at Denny's, or I think a minimum of like 32 hours a week, you get vacation benefits, and so I decided to use that time to spend away from him, and I flew back to Costa Rica for a week and a half.
And am I correct in assuming that was to spend time with Victor?
No, he didn't live in the house anymore. I stayed with the same family, but he had moved out and moved on.
So you spent about a week and a half, it sounds like, with Victor's family, not with him,
Yes.
and kind of assessing your life, is that
Yeah, I
fair
spent
to
a lot
say?
of time just reflecting and healing from that, and I felt in a lot better place by the time I came back. Victor, actually, I didn't see Victor 3 days before I flew back. So he took me out to dinner, and that was it, and then drove me to the airport.
When you say healing from that, what are you talking about? Healing from the relationship with Bobby?
Yes, because we kept going back, and I kept hearing about incidents where he was trying to hook up with other girls, but then he would deny it, and I didn't see anything, so there was just a lot of turmoil. We were arguing still, and then the physical incident that happened there, and I needed to just remove myself from the situation so that I could allow my heart to move on a little, and so that break from him, I thought, had helped me a lot.
So at some point in time, you were in love with Bobby, right?
Yes, very much. A lot more than I was Victor. Bobby was like my first true love.
Okay. So once you have spent some time in Costa Rica and you've, I guess, used your vacation time at Denny's, you come back to Wairika, I presume?
Yes, I did.
And how do you proceed in your life?
I went back to work, and I don't know if he was watching the restaurant, but the first day back, I was there. I went into the back of the restaurant to get something, and I came back out, and he was sitting at the counter.
He being who?
Bobby.
Okay.
He just had his face in his hands, and he has really beautiful eyes, and he was looking at me with these eyes, these puppy dog eyes, and I stopped and I was kind of shocked. I felt stronger emotionally, not as weak, but I was coming up on my half-hour break, so I said, just, wait a few minutes and we'll go outside and talk. So I went outside and we ended up talking for a long time. I mean, we rounded the corner and then hugged, and it was emotional and that kind of thing.
Okay. But how did was that the last time you saw Bobby?
No.
Okay. Did you continue in a relationship with him after that?
We decided we were going to continue a relationship, but we weren't getting along very well.
And I use the word relationship. Are we talking about friendship or a romantic relationship?
Romantic.
Did that also mean sexual?
It would have meant that. I don't really remember, but yeah, it would have meant that.
Okay. So why at this point in time were you still open to the idea of a romantic and potentially sexual relationship with a man who had choked you and thrown you down as you described?
Well, like I said, I considered those incidents isolated and not a pattern of his, and I still loved him, and he still loved me, and I didn't want to hurt him, and I didn't want to. I don't know. It just felt natural. I'd been with him for some years. He was my first love. Being with him, whether it was good or bad, it just felt natural, and it was what I was accustomed to.
Okay. So at what point in time then do you decide, you said you and Bobby explored this and decided it wasn't for the best? When does that take place?
There was sort of a turning point in my mind. Well, Costa Rica was like a good starting point where I thought I had moved on. If I hadn't seen him again, I think I would have been okay as far as never seeing him again. But I was weak when he came back, and so he sort of picked up again briefly. He moved to Medford, Oregon shortly thereafter. It's about 50 miles north of Wairika. And he moved in with Matt. And I would go up there and visit Bobby, and we'd hang out. And it seemed like once Bobby got on his feet, he didn't really want anything to do with me. And so it hurt my feelings, I guess, because he had kind of won me back, and I was helping him. But then when he got on his feet, he was kind of mean.
What do you mean you were helping him?
Well, I always helped him out until he was able to get it. He finally got a job when he moved to Medford. There was a woman he knew that was a notary public that grew up with him in school, so she was able to say this is really who he is, so he could get identification. We finally figured that out, and so.
Let me interrupt him. I want to make sure we're clear here. Even after the incident, what you were describing as a isolated incident of violence, even after the point in time when you find letters that are evidence that he's being unfaithful with you, and you come back from Costa Rica, you're going to move on, you've decided a romantic relationship isn't going to work, are we to understand that you're still supporting him financially as well? Or helping him?
Think that was a little bit out of order, but I did continue to help him. When I found out about the love letters, he promised to cut ties with her and not have any contact with her anymore. And it wasn't physical; it was online only. She lived in Louisiana, and I think he was still talking to her, but he promised me, "You'll never have to see me talking to her." So it was implied that he might talk to her, but he'll never do it in my presence. So it was kind of strange, but. And then again, the physical incident was isolated, so, if he needed clothing, I didn't buy him a whole wardrobe. I didn't have that kind of income. But if he needed a few shirts or something, he was really into South Park, so he saw these South Park t-shirts one time and he wanted those, so I bought them, sweatshirt, jeans, that kind of thing. Just some kind of clothing for him because his parents weren't able to provide that at that point. They were in a rest home.
Okay. And you said at this point in time, Bobby was living in Medford, Oregon with an individual named Matt, right?
Yes.
Okay. And just so we can get a sense of where this is compared to Wairika, could you describe for us where Medford is compared to Wairika?
Yes, it's on Interstate 5, just like Wairika. It's over the border. It's It's about an hour drive. I think 50 miles, but it takes about an hour to get there depending on traffic
Okay.
and the weather.
And I'm certainly not asking for population estimates, but is this a bigger town than Wairika?
It's a bigger town, not nearly as big as this area. It's very tiny in comparison, but it's much bigger than Wairika.
And you made trips up to Medford to see Bobby, is that right?
Yes, I would come up there on the weekend and stay. Bobby had a futon. They had kind of a studio, so Matt slept in his own bed, and Bobby and I had a futon. And we would hang out on the weekends and go out and do things.
Okay. And how many of these trips can you say? I mean, was this something you did every weekend? How frequently did you go up to spend time with Bobby?
I went up several times, but that period of our relationship was short-lived, so that didn't happen often. I mean, very extensively.
Okay. And this person, Matt, that he was roommates with, had you known Matt prior to these trips up to Medford?
No.
Okay. And does Matt have a last name?
McCartney.
Did you ever develop any sort of friendship or relationship with him?
Yes, we became friends around the time. I think he kind of noticed how Bobby was treating me, and it felt good to have somebody else kind of see my side of it. He wasn't attacking Bobby by any means, like saying, hey, you should be this way or that. But it just, I came up there one weekend to visit, and another girl came to visit Matt, and it was a real eye-opener because I saw how Matt was treating her, and he was very chivalrous and very polite, and he was a gentleman, and he just treated her with a lot of respect, and that's not something I had received, but I've seen it on TV and that kind of thing. So it was just jarring to see that, and then consider my relationship. So
well, let me ask you this. You said that was surprising for you to see, right?
yes.
And that isn't a way that you experienced Bobby treating you. Is that right?
No. Yes, that's right.
But you lived with your parents for 17 years, the first 17 years of your life, right?
Yes.
Did you not see your father treat your mother in this way? Did they treat each other in a different manner?
When I was young, my father was very affectionate with my mom. I've seen them kiss. I've seen them embrace. If there's a beautiful woman on TV and we're all sitting around watching it, he'll say she's not as pretty as your mom. Or, he put her on a sort of a pedestal, sort of. But then there were times when they would argue and fight, things like that.
You say argue and fight. What does that mean?
Not physical. They would sometimes. He would say something. My dad's very sarcastic, and he thinks he's funny. And sometimes he is. But he can be very uncouth sometimes. And so when things would come out of his mouth, my mom would just smack him on the arm. And he would smack her back, kind of as a way to say, don't do that. And then she would be offended by that, so she would smack him back. And then he'd smack her even harder. And then she would give up. But it was just on the arm. But, that's the only time I ever saw them be physical at all.
Did you know... how did your father treat your mother? Was he degrading to her? Did he criticize her?
I can't recall specific incidents, but that's very much my dad. He's very negative. He's very critical. He's very gossipy.
Very, what was that?
I don't know if that's a word, gossipy. He gossips a lot about people behind their back. He talks about them. He'll say things about, now we talk on the phone now, and he'll say things about my mom sometimes, or sometimes they have complaints about each other, but, they're still loyal to each other.
Well, what do you mean things he would say about your mom? What things would he complain about with your mother? Goes to modeling behavior.
Approach. Continue.
Without telling me specifically what he said, was there certain subject matters that your dad would degrade your mother regarding?
One I recall specifically is my mother used to be very thin, and I think she's like a size 10 now, I would guess. He used to put up photos of her on the refrigerator when she was thinner, and he would make comments about her weight gain. And just, he would put little things like that around the house to remind her that he would prefer her with less weight, things like that. So I don't know how that affected her, but that was pretty constant. If somebody was crossing the crosswalk that was overweight, he would yell at them, and I won't say what he said, but I don't know, things like that.
Okay. But you said your mother would just simply, you said something to the effect, you learned they were always loyal to each other.
Yes.
Your mom was always loyal to your dad. What do you mean by that?
Well, my parents weren't the kind where if one said no, you couldn't run to the other and have a different answer. Maybe if they weren't aware of their spouse's answer, but they were very united. If we were fighting, it didn't matter the points of the argument. My dad would side with my mom, or my mom would side with my dad at all times. So they were like one unit. They were very united. They're very loyal. And I think when I was younger, I heard my mom mention the word divorce one time, and that really like shook me, because I thought it just didn't seem, I couldn't imagine a world where my parents weren't married. And so they're still married today. I mean, even through bad times, they're still together. They still love each other.
Well, I should have been more clear in my question. You talked about loyalty as parents and backing each other up and that sort of thing. But what I was really asking about is in terms of the loyalty of the relationship. It sounds like from what you're telling us, your mom put up with a fair amount and remained loyal to your dad. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes. Yeah. They're very loyal. They're still married. They've been married about 33 and a half years. My grandparents are married. There's not a very high divorce rate in my family. So they're still together.
Okay. We were talking about this different way Matt McCartney was treating a female. I guess it was his girlfriend or someone he was dating. Is that correct?
I think it's somebody he had met online, or somehow. She lived in Crescent City. And she just came out for the weekend the same time I came out to see Bobby. And nothing ever really progressed with that. They didn't start dating or anything like that. They just hung out for the weekend, and I just saw how he was treating her.
Okay. Tell me how things then progressed in your life. Did you just keep working? Did your life change at all?
I wanted to work in an environment where I could earn a little bit more money. I needed a new car. There were different kinds of bills coming in at this point. And Medford is a town that has a lot more restaurants, a lot more business, that kind of thing. So as I got to know Matt and Bobby, Matt's mother lives in Wairika too, so I met her and his sister, and we all sort of became friends. And Matt's dad lived in a city called Phoenix. It's in just south of Medford, and it's in Oregon. And he lived with his girlfriend, Matt's dad, and they had an extra. Well, they said just come crash on our couch until you can get a job and get your own place. So I crashed on Matt's dad's couch where he and his girlfriend lived for, I don't remember how long, maybe a month. And I got a job at Applebee's and began to work there.
Okay. So did you then move out of your grandparents' house and move to Medford? Just tell us about that.
Yes. Right around the time I moved to Medford, Bobby and I stopped talking. I was hanging out with him and his sister and her son. And they were renting a house right across the street from my parents' house. So I was over there hanging out with them, and Bobby came by and saw Matt and I and Kiowa, who was his nephew. We were all in the front yard. We were playing with, they're called bokens, and they're just wooden swords just to practice form and things like that. And Matt was into martial arts also. So he was teaching me some things and teaching Kiowa some things, and Bobby came around the corner and saw us all like in formation or just hanging out and having fun, and he got really upset and he walked away. And I think Matt tried to talk to him. He didn't want to talk to either of us. And at that point, things just really stopped between Bobby and I. We stopped talking, we stopped communicating. I think he moved out of Matt's studio, and I didn't see or hear from him again.
Okay. Where were you? You mentioned crashing on Matt's father's couch,
Yes.
right? And Matt's father had a girlfriend that he lived with in this home.
Yes.
Okay. Once you got a job and got settled in Medford, where did you wind up living?
Let's see. After Bobby and I stopped talking, Matt and I began to hang out more, and we developed feelings for each other. And so about a month, maybe 5 weeks went by, and Matt moved out of his studio apartment and got an apartment. And at that point, I went to live with him there, and I moved out of his dad's house, and we rented a one-bedroom apartment in Medford.
And when was this?
I would say at this point it was early 2000, I think.
Okay, and at this point in time, Matt McCartney is your boyfriend?
Yes. Well, I don't remember us making it official, but we became romantic, and then we were boyfriend, girlfriend.
Okay. Judge, this might be a good time.